So we are here with Marcus Chan on the Teflon Tales. So Teflon Tales, for those of you who are here for the first time, is really an engaging conversation with people like Marcus who are living the Teflon life. And what is the Teflon life, right? When you think of a Teflon plate, what characteristics? It heats up quickly, it cools down quickly, it's non-sticky and super versatile. So I'll stop over there. Marcus, talk a little bit about who you are, and your LinkedIn profile says from speedos to seven-figure contracts, right? So, and I have a bunch of questions for you, but really, if you can talk about your journey, and particularly about places where you were forced to live the Teflon life at that moment, where you walked away from things. And I know we've talked a lot about it. I want the listeners and viewers to get a sense of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So first off, thanks so much for having me on. And, first of all, I love this concept of the Teflon tails and really being able to adapt in whatever it was, hot, it's cold, being able to move with that. Right. And I find just in general, most people who are able to live like a Teflon tail type life, if you will, it doesn't really matter what gets thrown at them. They'll be able to adapt and survive and thrive. Right. And I'll say, at least for me, just a quick little backstory. I was born and raised in Springfield, Oregon. That's where I first grew up. And really, really poor. My parents were, immigrants from China and Taiwan. They actually escaped the Cultural Revolution, and they came to America with absolutely nothing. So they were like real poor, like not America poor, but real poor,
Wow.
Like living in shacks, like not know what you're going to eat, not like America poor. So very, very different.
Right.
So when they came to America, we didn't really have much, right? They really, really didn't. So eventually they started their own restaurant, and in our very first home in Springfield, Oregon, we have 6 of us living there, small house. And we had to adapt regardless, right? Without having much money, you always have to find a way to kind of survive and thrive. And early on, there's always things that will just happen to us that you just have to keep on moving, right? So for example, I remember, being 6, 7 years old, which I started working at my parents' restaurant at a very young age. They had a Chinese restaurant. I remember, going to my parents' restaurant to help out on a Saturday. And we get there in the morning, like 10 o'clock in the morning, and somebody had broken in overnight. They had smashed the windows, stole money out of the till, trashed the whole place, right? And, it being super poor and in my mind, I'm like, oh man, what are we going to do, right? What are we going to do? We're going to lose the restaurant, et cetera, right? And, my dad was just able to, adapt on the fly, of course, and it wasn't anything crazy, but he knew it to keep on going. We keep on going, right? So we couldn't cry over spilled milk, if you will. It's like, okay, you know what? What are we going to do? Okay, you know what? Let's call the cops. Let's assess the damage. What's done has been done. What can we do now? So that was really early on. Those are some important lessons I saw, that regardless, whatever could happen to my parents, whatever got thrown their way, they would adapt to, push through or around whatever obstacle it was. And I saw that just growing up, right? So for example, another really good example is, I actually grew up with a speech impediment, and I didn't start speaking until I was 4 years old. And when I did start speaking, I stuttered a lot. I couldn't speak very well. It was a mixture of 2 different languages, because my first language is Mandarin Chinese. And I also learned Cantonese at the same time. So I actually knew 3 languages as a kid, and English not very well. And I really struggled communicating. So early on, I was made fun of. I was teased, I was the weird kid. And also, it was a predominantly white town. So I already stood out, so I was made fun of quite a bit. And growing up in that environment, being poor and also standing out and looking different, you were forced to adapt, right? I remember going through speech therapy classes and learning and working to improve myself and not giving up and persevering, eventually pass those classes, but still struggling with speaking properly. So over time, of course, by continuing to work on my language skills and working and mastering it, I've gotten better over time. I'm still not perfect, still kicks in every now and then, but that's just another example right there of being able to push through some of that adversity as well. And then, of course, eventually fast forward a little bit, eventually, went to school, graduated, and started my very first role in B2B sales, outside B2B sales. And I happened to start in the heart of the last recession, when it was about to start, 2007. And that was during a recession, doing outside B2B sales, selling something I had no idea how to sell without any training. And fortunately, I was able to kind of push through that and have success from there. and get promoted multiple times, and eventually stayed in corporate America for 14 plus years, and was able to get promoted 10 times in 10 years, and ran very, very large teams of over 100 plus employees, doing millions and millions in revenue, and then eventually leaving that to start my own business, which I started last year, which seemed like a great idea to start a business before the recession, before this current recession, which I thought didn't happen, right?
Okay,
But
so you've packed so much into that.
You told me to give you some examples. Okay, well, here's
I'm going to start.
boom, right?
I'm going to start unpacking, right? Because you have had your share of more than your share of adversity early on, right? So seeing how your mom and dad adapted, you got life skills. So how would you, like if there were viewers right now listening and saying who've had, let's say, a less, a more cocooned life, right?
Yeah.
And yet, if one thing this pandemic has taught us, it is nothing is forever, nothing is secure, no industry is impregnable. And you better have more life skills. You better have multiple Teflon pans on at the same time. So let's say you're talking to me, right? I just hit 50, and let's say I've had, and I'm making it up. Let's say I've had one career in a large company, and I'm getting anxious, and I want to be Teflon like. What can Marcus tell me? Like, what can I start doing right here, right now, to start getting some of the Teflon characteristics in me at this point?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? I think the very first thing is you have to get crystal clear on your why, right? That's really important, right? It shouldn't be like, well, I'm going to do it because I'm worried about losing my job, right? That's not going to be enough. Like, you'd be really crystal clear, like, what's your why? What drives you? One of the ways to become, Teflon, like I find, is you have a greater purpose, a greater belief of what you want to accomplish, which allows you to push through more, right? Which allows you to, like if for example, I'll give you an example. So for me, I know one of my big whys is to leave a legacy, to know that I left behind something truly great. I built something truly great and it really positively impact and influence other people. Yep. So that being said, that drives every behavior I do. So if I have a really tough day, which we all have tough days, bad things happen, I'm able to push through. Right. And for someone, say, for example, in an example situation, maybe it's you or somebody else out there, start with that first. Okay. If tomorrow you were to not exist, you passed away, what do you want to be known for? What are 2 or 3 words you'll be able to describe you as, or nouns of what you have left behind? Start with that first. When we start with that first, then you can figure out the how. Right. So now you have the why. Now it's the how. Right. And then it's like, okay, how are you going to be able to chase after that? Right. How are you going to be able to showcase that? So, for example, let's just say maybe you just want to make sure it's love. Maybe it's like your heart's full of love and you want to be able to showcase your love and actually kind of do some soul searching. Well, regardless of whatever happens with your career, your job, whatever happens, you can still showcase love. You can still do it regardless, right? So that's really important, right? And then you can start, taking actions toward it, right? Because then you might have some other thing. You know what? I also want to show love to other people by donating my time and my knowledge, because maybe I've been an engineer for 30 years and I want to help engineering students.
Yeah.
Well, you can start taking action doing that now. Right. Here's the thing: when you start taking action to do things, it's like this, right? I shared a post about this the other day, but when you want to build really strong confidence, it's like a bank account. Okay. And every action you take either is a deposit into your confidence bank account or removes from it. Right. So if you think about this, apply the same concept to being Teflon like. Like when you take actions regardless of how you feel, based off the goals you already have set, you are putting deposits in there. So for example, that same scenario where let's say you want to showcase love and you want to help engineering students out, taking the action, finding the schools, reaching out to those professors, reaching out to those programs, start mentoring those students and taking action by doing it consistently, you are adding confidence into your mind, into your brain about being Teflon-like. And that applies to really anything you want to work towards. By taking that action, it will build your confidence. So whatever happens. right? You're like, okay, it is what it is. It doesn't matter. Like if if X happened, it won't matter because I'm gonna still keep on going. And here's what's interesting: once you have goals and once you have a big why in place, and once you start taking action,
Uh-huh.
inevitably obstacles show up. That's
Yeah.
normal. So by continuing to take action, it shows either how to go through it or around it. And that's really, really powerful to think that way. And when you start thinking that way, you start taking action that way, it changes how you act and how you believe. Right. And there's a really, really great quote in the movie called The Martian by with Matt Damon in there at the
Uh-huh.
very end of the movie. And he's like, he's talking about how he's in Mars,
Uh-huh.
right? Like in Mars, like to get back home is a goal, right? But you have always problems.
Right.
So first you solve one problem, but what happens is another problem shows up. So you solve that problem, and then another problem shows up. Then you solve that problem. And eventually, if you solve enough problems,
Uh-huh.
you get to go home. And right? It's the
Yeah.
same concept with being Teflon like, right? Which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really being able to adapt and solve problems. That's all it really is. Adapt and solve problems. Adapt and solve problems. You do it enough, eventually you'll achieve your why. Eventually you get to go home. Eventually you'll be Teflon like. It won't really matter, right? But the more you do it, the more your confidence builds. Because on the
I
flip
could not agree more. So I just wanted to kind of interject a little bit over here because as you were saying, some of the things that you mentioned just resonated so strongly with me. One of the things that talking about the why, right? So in my LinkedIn profile, the first two words are people connector, but it took me 49 years to figure that out, right?
yeah.
And now, whether I'm talking to Marcus, whether I'm doing my tech ask with Secure Dynamics, whether I'm doing other kinds of engagement, or the thing that actually it really surprised me, should create a short video about this, is it's one thing that you and I are connecting, and that's a personal thing. It helps me. But the thing that I find most fulfilling is when I connect two individuals that I have met, and I feel that they'll benefit from each other, right? So
Mhm.
it's that multiplier effect that cause. So one of the other things, again, pivoting back to, and I cut you short when you were talking early on, which I think is another thing that quote unquote successful people struggle with, is you had become an extremely successful salesperson, and then
Mhm.
last year you decided you wanted to do something more. You wanted to build a legacy. You wanted to leave something behind, and so you pivoted. Again, talking about being Teflon is like you get hot, but you have to get cool very quickly in order to try
Yes.
something new.
Yes.
Extremely hard to do. Again, tips. How do you do that? How do you walk away from success towards another thing which is more fulfilling?
Yeah. So that's such a great question, right? And what's really interesting is it wasn't like overnight. I'm like, I'm gonna go do this. All right.
Yeah.
In fact, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never wanted to have my own business, which I think is probably different than most people. And the reason was growing up, I saw how hard my parents worked. I mean, they were putting in easily 70, 80 hours a week. They had a restaurant they could never leave. They were a slave to the restaurant. That's how it seemed, right? And they busted their tails, and the income really wasn't really that impressive. And when you own a restaurant, it's not that great. And I saw that. So for me, I was like, okay, when I graduate, I'm gonna go get a job,
Mhm.
or I don't have to be working. I don't have to be a sweat. I don't have to wear a sweaty T-shirt in a restaurant or work at a festival cooking Chinese food in 100-degree weather. I want to wear a shirt and tie. I want to be someone important. I want to be someone of in a position of power that
Mhm.
someone respects. I can build my life not off my physical energy of working in a restaurant, but off my brain. And that was really important to me. So when I started doing that by going into sales, that was like what I saw as the vehicle to get there.
Right.
And I think when I started doing it, as I hit struggles, and over time I eventually had success. For at least for 8 years, I was like, I'm good. I love what I'm doing. I'm climbing the corporate ladder. I'm making a
Yep.
phenomenal income. I'm making an impact. I'm doing all these things. Like at that point, I had done everything I wanted to do. Like, I mean, I bought my first house at 25. I got married. I got my MBA. I was running large teams, doing great income. Like, life was like on paper. I had the American dream,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
You had achieved it, except
Right, right in my head. But then, like it was really interesting as I continued to climb the ladder.
yeah.
Um, I started. I mean, I don't know. I don't say I was reflecting, but as I started reading more books and really
Mhm.
become more enlightened, other ways of thinking.
Mhm.
Um, I realized I really didn't know my why. And I thought I did, right? I thought I knew my why. I'm like, oh, you know what? My why is I'm going to go and just achieve and win. And this is my life and climb the ladder and do this. But I realized at that point, I was chasing means goals.
Yeah.
I was chasing ends goals, right? I was chasing a role, a car, a house, a title. I was chasing these little short-term little goals, but I wasn't chasing something greater. And
Yeah.
once I uncovered what my end goal were, like those end goals, it opened something up.
Yeah.
And at that point, once I knew that, I'm like, wow. And it wasn't like, okay, cool. This is 2015, by the way. I wasn't like, okay, I need to quit my job. It wasn't like that. It was still like it was a little seed. It was planted in my brain then,
Right.
right? And what was interesting is I started taking some action towards them. I'm like, how can I make a little bit a bigger impact, right? I'm like, you know what? And people always told me, Marcus, you should write a book. So I said, okay, I'll write a book. So I wrote a couple of ebooks and I started to sell those online, and people were buying them. And I'm like, wow, this is actually kind of weird. Like, I didn't realize people actually would buy this. It's kind of a gamble. I didn't know anything about internet marketing. I was trying to figure it all out. And each ebook was like $9. It wasn't very much money. So I knew I couldn't quit my high-paying corporate job to go do that. So I started to study more and learn about internet marketing. That little seed started getting watered every day. A little bit of fertilizer, a little bit of water. And over time, I suddenly realized I could build a digital business.
Mm.
And if I did build a digital business, I mean, it obviously would be rewarded financially, but more importantly, I could impact millions. And that was an aha, right? And that was really important. So knowing that why allowed me to figure out the how. And now I figured out the how. I could do a digital course. And then from there, I started just testing, and eventually I built my first version, did a really soft launch a couple years ago, and it launched, and overnight I made $2,000.
Mm.
So now the how became really crystal clear. I'm like, oh, the how is kind of maybe to whoa. This is like not $9. This is like I can scale this. I can build a real business off this, right? And then from there, I mapped everything out to eventually make my leap, because at that point I knew my why, I knew my how, right? Now I just had to make that leap of faith. And was it really hard? So hard. I mean, it was really, really hard. I mean, I love what at the time. I mean, I had a large organization, I had lots of employees, so I had really good influence, really good impact. Love the people I work with, still love the company, still love this. I still have a huge fan. I'm still friends with many of those people still. It's so hard because I've worked with them for almost 9 years. That was like my other family. And it was so hard to leave them. But I knew for me to achieve my purpose in life, I would have to give the good for the great. I would have to make that sacrifice, if you will, and go after it, even if it meant going after it and failing. But I knew I'd much rather try and fail than not try at all. And
Wow.
And
Okay,
that's
so I have to pause over here, because
Yeah.
one of the things that you mentioned, right? Again, I'm going back to the things that I believe people find the hardest to do, which is rolling back to 2015, right? You're incredibly successful. The seed has been planted. You're putting fertilizer, you're watering, and wanting to see whether the plant grows or not. You're doing that while still having a full-time job, still having people report to you. And lots of times, myself included many years ago, you get wrapped around the circle, right? Which is, my job is me, I'm the job. And how can I be doing something else outside? What if the
Yes.
world outside judges me? What if I'm
Yes.
not a team player because I'm doing something outside? How
Yes.
do you get past that?
Yeah, that was super hard. And you're spot on. I mean, I got judged very quickly. I remember like at that point, first thing I did was I created an Instagram page, right? Okay, an Instagram page. At the time, the book I had written was called 6x6 Success, which was what was it? I can't remember what it was about anymore. Like, it was a long ago, but that was the name of the company, or the company I built. I started, right, and I started posting stuff every day. And it was interesting. I remember everyone's like, "That's kind of weird. Like, what are you doing? Like, you have a day job?" And I'm like, "Well, I want to impact people, right?" And first of all, like, why are you doing this, right? And what's really, really interesting is I just kept posting, giving value, giving value. I was doing videos, you know, it's just being, it was more about personal development, right? I was posting a lot and I started building a following, right? And then suddenly before I knew it, I had over 10,000 followers on Instagram. And it was at the time, organic reach was amazing. A ton, crazy engagement. I mean, like I'll put a post up within 5 minutes. I have hundreds of likes and engage. And I mean, I'll get tons of DMs. I mean, I wasn't really monetizing very well, but like people were like, whoa, how are you doing this? Right. Because I'll still sell my ebook for like a while. After a while, people are like, why do you then how?
Right.
And that was really interesting, right? And what's really neat as well is I was really careful. Like I didn't market it to anyone at work. I didn't really talk about it at work.
Yep.
People would just stumble upon it and just ask me about it. And then I would tell them about it, but I would make sure because I never wanted them to think I was crossing over. So I wanted really clear separation. So I was always like, oh yeah, this is something I do for fun, right? You know, at the time I still wasn't gonna be a business that I was looking to do because even the concept, I hadn't even proven that I could monetize it in a way that could allow me to leave a corporate job. So I was kind of doing it on the side for fun, like, you know, it was just a fun project, and it was really cool just to, I mean, I'll like random people would message me, you know, and I'd be DMing them, helping them out, and they'd say awesome and that was really cool to get that feeling, like that fulfillment. I was helping people that were in other industries be successful, and that was really, really impactful for me. And the whole time, I definitely had people that judged me for sure, right? Here's what I found though: a lot of times when people are judging you for doing those things, taking the actions that you are chasing after your dreams on, oftentimes when they're making fun of you, it's because they are insecure about themselves. They fear
100% agree.
They fear doing themselves. They fear putting themselves out there. But the reality is if you're able to put yourself out there, it's amazing what you can do, right? It's one of those things where like, well, it's really neat. As I started like posting more on Instagram, and people would like DM me and be like, hey, I really need that today. Thank you so much. I'm like, wow. Like, that's really cool.
That's the impact that you're having, and you're getting the feedback that more than makes up for all of the other judgment that people are doing.
100%, 100%, right? And of course, like, what's interesting is even when I started my own business, same thing. I mean, it's scary to announce to people you're starting your own business because you see very quickly who supports you, who doesn't, right? It's kind of like I saw a separation very quickly at my last company, right? Like there were some diehard, family and friends, if you will, at the company that still support me today, and there's some that kind of just dissipated, they kind of hid into the shadows, you know. And that's normal because I understand for them might get a little awkward if they're supporting me too much, and they're still the company. I understand they might get looked upon a little weird, but I get it, right? Because it's not uncommon that if they, I see people leave that company, they're reaching out to me. They're like, hey, I just want to tell you, I've been loving your stuff, man. Keep it up. It's such an inspiration that you did this, you made this leap, you're making it happen. Because they got to see the journey. Because there's also a little fear, right? Because like I start something, like I don't know how it's gonna go. Like I'm stepping off as blind now, right? Like who knows what's gonna happen? Of course, everyone sees it. At this point, my personal audience of people I know is hundreds of people, if not thousands of people at that company. And they can all see it, and there's fear. What if I fail in front of them? What are they gonna say? They're gonna say, hey, this guy who was once someone of a big deal at our company, look at him fail. Fear, real fear,
And so one of the things that you mentioned, and this is the last one, but I think it's a loaded one, so I'm warning you, right? Which is, so Teflon gets heated very quickly, right? But that's because you have imbibed the Teflon-like qualities that allows you to get hot very quickly, right? So if I see Marcus right now and I see, you're getting 10,000 followers overnight on Insta, and your average post gets over thousands of views, I don't see the work that has gone in order for you to become Teflon-like. So again, talk a little bit about you looking back, letting people know that, hey, I was in that exact same spot 5 years ago, 8 years ago, and this is what I walked you through, right? So the heating up process, how do you kind of break it down so others feel they're more empowered to take a chance?
Yeah, great question, right? So it's interesting, right? So I just finished up my first full year in business. Okay.
Congrats.
We finished off. So thank you so much. Like literally September 19th was my anniversary, right? So and I feel so blessed and so fortunate that we had just an absolutely phenomenal year. Great net income year, great revenue year especially for first year business. We were profitable every single month. I got recognized in Market Watch, Yahoo Finance. I was able to get quite a bit of recognition on even LinkedIn. I mean, I built a nice following on LinkedIn. Now we're at, not that follower counts matter, but I'm at like 13,000 plus followers now. That's what people kind of see on the surface, right?
Exactly.
They kind of see that, right?
Yeah.
Let me share with you what it took now. Okay. So
I'm getting ready. Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about even the LinkedIn piece, right? So on the LinkedIn piece, here's what people did not see. What they did not see or did not realize is I have written probably, let's see, easily 250 plus posts, right?
Okay.
Of content, right? And that's literally 250 posts. I mean, that's literally hundreds and thousands of words of content that I've had to create and write and put together, right? So what people don't see is when that happens, right? What they don't see are the 15 to 20-hour days of not just posting content, right? But going in, creating content, engaging with people, reaching out to prospects, like testing different things, trying to build a website, having a website fail, testing webinars, so having that fail, testing new software, having that fail, just over and over and over. You don't see that. You don't get to see the 60, 80-hour weeks. You don't get to see when something goes sideways. You're like, oh man, should I go back to corporate America? Right? Because you don't get to see the wins. You don't see the deals that get lost. You don't see the rejection that happens. You don't see the second guessing that happens. Even when you have success, imposter syndrome is a real thing.
Yep.
I'll be lying to you if I don't tell, if I didn't say it didn't kick in, right? Like, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like this month, I'm like, I mean, even this early this week, I'm like, man, maybe I should go back to corporate America, right? This happened like Monday. Like, man, I should go back to corporate America. I'm like, it was interesting. What was interesting was because I'm like, like, I've been having these banner months nonstop, and this month is like, okay. It's still way better than any month my first 6 months of being an entrepreneur. But in my mind, I'm like, oh man, but I've had like this 6-month run rate of absolutely phenomenally crushing it. Then like, I need to get some perspective here. Hold on. So I had to slow myself down, give myself some perspective, right? But that's a real thing. That's a real thing that happens, right? A lot of people don't realize that, right? They also don't see just the struggle and the challenge you run into as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur. You do anything and everything, right? You don't see the haters that DM you, the haters on the comments, challenging you, calling you out, trying, what happens is as you build a following, you just get also trolls, and you get people that question you and challenge you, and that's just who they are. It still hurts. It still hurts. I'll tell you what, it still hurts. Testing out advertising on Facebook, and weirdos are writing weird comments on there.
Yeah.
Still weird. Still don't like it, right? But you just gotta keep going, right? Yeah. So and I share that just because people saw all the successes, right? 99% of everything else is like a failure and struggle. That's what it is, right? Like the 1% I share, 99% is just a bunch of like hot messes, things not going the way you want, right? Even from like COVID-19 hit everybody else as well, same thing, right? It's like, boom, like, man, that's hard. Like, people don't see the struggle of trying to balance it. And because I have more control of my schedule, my wife is not working in corporate America. I'm working weird hours, right? I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning so I can work on things, get things done for the business for 3 or 4 hours before the kiddo wakes up. Then I'm taking over for 6 hours so she can work for a bit, and then I'll have a chunk of time to work again, right? So those are all the things that people don't always see, and that's why I always say, it's like there's a very fine line between being self-employed and unemployed, right? Very fine line, right? And a lot of times, if you misread it, people glamorize what it's all about, and the wins are obviously amazing and you feel so high, but the lows are real hard too, right? Because it's the thing when what people don't realize is, especially from a even financial perspective, when you run a business as a solopreneur, you essentially are 100% commission now. That's all you are.
Exactly.
right? So like, if you're not smart with your time and you waste your time, you're not doing income producing activities, you can burn yourself out doing things that that aren't smart, right? So that's why I'm so careful with my time, intentional with what I do. Like, I mean, to add to it even more, right? What people also did not have not seen is this year I have been on 50 to 60 plus podcast interviews and lives like this. And why do I do it? Number one, I love to give back. Number two, it's also really great for my own personal exposure.
Yeah.
So you add them with all the content, the blog posts, the texts, the DMs that you have to create, to the videos, to the live. It all adds up, and you see a lot of it, and you might see any result. And the first 3 to 6 months, it definitely was way more work than the income I got out of it.
Yeah.
Right. It takes a while to show up. Right. But if you put the work up front and you have the greater vision, then it'll keep going there. But the key is simple this. I also have to make sure I'm humble enough to know what got me here so far. My first year having success will not keep me here.
Yeah.
Year 2, I need to work just as hard. I got to earn it every single day, regardless, because success is rented. It's never owned. We got to earn it every single day. Every single day.
Well said. Yeah, and that's exactly like the Teflon thing, right? Hey, you ought to be non-sticky. Realize that, hey, you could get cool very, very quickly, right?
Yeah.
The world decides, hey, I don't like the dish that you're making, right? And you got to get hot again. So lots to think about. And again, Marcus, I appreciate your time. I know it's late for you, but the point that you mentioned at the end, just using the opportunity on LinkedIn Live and other platforms to kind of give back, but also use that as a vehicle to kind of help others go through their journey and look for tips. I love the fact that you talked about the iceberg that people don't get to see below the ocean, right? That you kind of gave us a glimpse of. Because I think that I'm hopefully empowers viewers to kind of, hey, take the chance, take the risk. There's no bigger risk than continue doing what you are, wondering whether it's going to be needed or relevant for tomorrow, right? So thank you, sir. Stay safe, and looking forward to more chats in the future.
Thanks so much. See ya.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Bye-bye.